And for the sake of this segment, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about Mikko Rantanen. What is going to happen or what should happen, it really depends entirely on your perspective. Because the Hurricanes have to determine two things. The first is, what are you with Mikko Rantanen? What are you? Are you a legitimate Stanley Cup contender with Mikko Rantanen? And if the answer to that is yes, and we'll get into my thoughts on that in a second, because their thoughts are the only ones that matter here. If they decide that with Mikko Rantanen, we absolutely can win a Stanley Cup, well then, the answer to part two of this equation doesn't matter. Because you made this trade, there is no chance that you can recoup what you gave up to get him. No chance. So, if you believe you are a Stanley Cup contender with him, then that's the answer. We don't have to go any further. But if you decide that, probably not, which, for the sake of this conversation, that's where I am. I don't think they are. So if the team thinks probably not, they have to determine then, can we re-sign him? If the answer to that is, because the only way they would really know is if they've been given kind of an inclination as to what his plans are. And I don't know what has transpired between Mikko Rantanen, his agent, him, like as a human being, and the team. What has been reported has been, well, he's not ready to sign. That doesn't mean he won't, but he's not ready to sign. But if the team believes, we're not gonna be able to re-sign him, and we don't think we're really a Stanley Cup contender with him, well then, when do you want your embarrassment pill? Because it doesn't matter when it happens, if and when Mikko Rantanen moves on to another team, whether it's by Friday at the trade deadline or on July 1 in free agency, the Hurricanes are going to be publicly humiliated. Because for the second straight year, you made the biggest swing at the trade deadline and you weren't able to keep that player. Set aside the Jake Guentzel thing in a second because it has an impact here. But on its face, you made this trade for Mikko Rantanen, and I said earlier that there was bad juju, not about the trade, but about the way it was talked about right off the hop. And it was irresponsible and wrong right off the hop, but that's okay. It doesn't really matter. I love Paul Bissonnette, but Paul Bissonnette said from Jump Street, Mikko Rantanen will never sign there, based on Jake Guentzel. All right, we're going to get back to Guentzel in a second. I think it was Nick Kyprios of Sportsnet. Mikko Rantanen is going to sign there, based on Paul Bissonnette's comments about Jake Guentzel. Bad faith arguments. Both of them, bad faith arguments. I promise Jake Guentzel wanted to be here. He would have re-signed had the Hurricanes offered him the contract 2 weeks prior to July 1. But they didn't. They tried to get him to accept a lower number, which is their prerogative. And they had salary cap issues. Eric Tulsky's talked about that. But they could have done it. They tried to get him to accept a lower number. It got close to the day of free agency. They finally did. Remember, they met. We met his offer. 8 times 8. But at that point, it was too late. Guentzel would have signed if they had just gotten to that point sooner. So it ain't like Guentzel didn't want to be here. He did. And then, no state income tax, chance to play with Kucherov and Point. One guy definitely a Hall of Famer. The other guy probably a Hall of Famer. I get it. So the Gensel thing has been misrepresented from the start. Now how it goes forward. If the Hurricanes can't re-sign Mikko Rantanen, if they know that they can't re-sign Mikko Rantanen when the season is over, and they don't believe that they are a legitimate Stanley Cup contender with him, then they have a decision to make. When do we want to be publicly flogged by the hockey universe? Do we want to be flogged on Friday, but maybe recoup some things that can help us not only the rest of this year, but going forward? Or do we want to be publicly flogged on July 1 when he signs a contract somewhere else? That's the decision. When do you want to eat your humble pie? My feeling is that if they don't think that they are a Stanley Cup contender and that they won't be able to re-sign him, my feeling is you move him now. Move him now. See if you can get a piece that A, can help you. It won't be Mikko Rantanen, good. But maybe you can get something that will help you next year, the year after. We talked about this. I talked about it on the podcast. I encourage you. Go check out the latest Canes Corner podcast right now. If you want to just dial it up on YouTube, you can. You can certainly subscribe and like. This is a cheap way of getting a plug-in for the podcast, true. But I talked about this for, about 10 minutes at like 22:47 on YouTube. Go to it. Go check it out. Carolina has, right now, a need in goal because neither Anderson or Kochetkov has played well enough that you shouldn't believe, that they can be good enough in the playoffs to steal you around. And you don't necessarily have to have a round stolen for you, but the way they have played with the power play as it is, goals have been at a premium, which means you're going to need lights-out goaltending to give yourself a chance to make the second round. They have holes on defense because Dmitry Orlov has not been good, and Brent Burns has been kind of a mixed bag, and maybe that's being kind. When he's not turning it over, I think he's been fine, but I do think he's playing too many minutes, but Carolina really doesn't have a lot of options. So you got Slavin, you've got Chatfield. Those are your two defensive-minded defensemen. Man, they could really use another guy who could skate and defend. So those two things are glaring needs for me right now, which is why if somebody asked me on a scale of 1 to 10, give me the Hurricanes, where you put the Hurricanes as Stanley Cup contenders, I would say 6. That to me is not a Stanley Cup contender. Now, granted, and we're going to talk to Greg Wyshynski tomorrow, and Corey Lavalette will join us next hour, by the way. The East has sort of come wide open. Florida just acquired Seth Jones. Jones hasn't been really good, but maybe he's been really bad because he's in Chicago and they're awful. He's going to Florida. Matthew Tkachuk was just put on long-term injured reserve, so now they have more money. Florida is going to completely load up. I don't know. Florida looks pretty good, but after that, does anybody really trust Toronto? Carolina without too much. Carolina could be in the Eastern Conference Finals. That's the part of this equation that is so odd to me, is that I don't have great confidence that Carolina will be good enough, except I look at their side of the draw and I think, man, they might win 2 rounds on this side, because I don't want to doubt Washington, but I still think Washington has been really greater than their individual parts. The sum has been greater. And maybe Washington will be this year's Hurricanes from the first year of the playoff run. It's very possible. But it might just break in their favor to win a couple of rounds. But I just think you're asking for breaks.
I feel like this is a page out of the Carolina Panthers book where maybe this year was supposed to be a rebuild year, but we're deciding, oh no, never mind, let's not do that and try to plug the pieces in as fast as we can.
It was supposed to be a retool year.
Mm-hmm.
Go back to the beginning of the season. I use this in the intermission. We're going to break here. If I had told you at the beginning of the season that with 21 games to play, the Hurricanes would be in second place in the Metropolitan Division, you would have thought you were trailing the Rangers or maybe the Devils. You would have gone, yeah, I'll take it. Every single Hurricanes fan would have signed for that then. But we watched the first 25 games. And we thought, oh my gosh, this team is good. Really good. I did too. I'm not going to lie. All the offense masked the problems that we're seeing now. The offense has dried up. Power play has gone away. Defense, goaltending, still a problem.